Hi everybody, this is Matt from Microwaves TV, and today I'm going to do another OPZ video. For this one, it's something special. I spent a few weeks making an Ableton Live template that allows you to basically plug this in and use this as your master sequencer in Ableton Live, and also have 8 tracks in Ableton Live, 4 drums and 4 synths, identical to the same tracks that are the same 8 tracks that are on here, and also have 2 effect sends that function very similar to the 2 effect sends on the OPZ. Also the master effects of chorus, drive, and the filter on the master channel, similar to what you have on the OPZ. So the idea was I want to be able to work on the OPZ remotely, without a computer, without it plugged into any other stuff, the way I like to work on it. And then take that, plug it into the computer, get my Ableton Live template running, and basically kind of pick up where I left off. With the template, you can easily swap out your drum sounds. You can use different synth engines that are not available on the OPZ. You can record audio tracks all separately, all within the Ableton Live environment, which you can't easily do on the OPZ. And you get the benefit of nice delay and really nice sounding reverbs, which the OPZ just doesn't have. I'm excited about sharing this with you guys. I'm almost at 1,000 subscribers, so I figured, hey, I'll make this available to everybody here as a special gift for hanging with me. But yeah, it's been a little while since I've shared some new material. I have a 2-year-old at home who is taking up a lot of my time. So in the background, I've been trying to work on developing a solution that would give me some more sounds to work with and some added flexibility that this device just doesn't have on its own. So yeah. So in today's video, just a couple of things. The template was made with Live 10 Suite. So I also have Max for Live installed, and I used a couple of Max for Live instruments. But all of the other instruments that I'm using sampler for the drums, and I'm using operator. I'm using the wavetable synth that Ableton has, and also using analog, the synth. I'm using that synth particularly for the bass. And I created some instrument racks to simplify and consolidate some of the MIDI CC mappings. Where things got really complicated was actually, it wasn't so much mapping out the MIDI CCs, but it was more about fine-tuning how those parameters, like what the maximum and minimum values would be, specifically for like the attack, decay, sustain, and release envelope settings. The nice thing is you can use some of the MIDI performance effects on here and have it translate over to the Ableton Live template, which was one of the things that I was really setting out to achieve. I really like using those on here. And I wanted to have those same MIDI-based effects made available in a more studio-friendly environment. Just want to go over a few things on how you use this Ableton template with the OPZ. So first, you have to connect your OPZ through USB directly to your computer. Once you do that, you can open up the Ableton preferences, and you should see the OPZ show up in the MIDI ports here. I have track set to on, remote set to on. I haven't messed with any of the MIDI clock sync changes. That's not something I'm going to cover here. Output to OPZ, I have on for track and on for remote. All right, and then for whatever reason I had this set to minus 39 milliseconds. All the syncing stuff you can kind of tweak later on, but for right now I just want to get through how things are mapped out. So let's start with the kick drum. So on the OPZ, I have track 1 selected, and in my Ableton session, you see I have the kick drum track 1 selected. Now on this track, I have this MIDI CC mapper max for live instrument, and basically what this has allowed me to do is use these CC numbers, these MIDI CC numbers that are coming from the OPZ 1 through 8, and map them to specific parameters on this sampler template. So basically, if you see me press a key, you hear a kick drum coming through. And I basically have the same sample mapped to all of the 24 keys that are on the OPZ. And if you want to put your own custom sample onto one of these keys, all you have to do is literally drag and drop a sample from your browser over here in Ableton onto the sampler instance here. Now, the other thing to note is that you can have up to 24 different samples mapped to all the different keys that are on the OPZ. So basically have it function in the same way, where you can assign a sample to each of the keys on the OPZ. Similar to the OPZ, this first parameter, pitch, affects the pitch of the sample either way, and then once you get it to the middle, it doesn't affect the original pitch. Parameter 2 is usually used for reverse on the OPZ. I unmapped it because it wasn't something that I liked, to be honest, and it was causing more problems. Basically, yeah, it's not worth getting into now. If you want to, you can simply map it to this reverse button here, which it is now, but I'm going to undo that. Let's get to parameter 3. So this is the filter cutoff. So it goes both ways. It goes from center to high pass and then center to low pass. And in the center point, it should be a dry signal. It shouldn't have the filter affect any of the signal coming through here. Now, same with if you crank the resonance when you're in the center here, similar to how it works on the OPZ, you shouldn't hear anything until you engage, until you push it up or you push it down. So I tried to mimic how the filter on the OPZ works. That required basically setting up an effect chain here. And that's, I don't need to get into all the details, but it's not just a simple bandpass filter that's happening here. There's a dry signal, there's high pass, and then there's like a high pass that cancels out. It sort of like allows you to fade in and out of each of these low pass filters and gradually fade between the two, as you can see here. So by messing with the phase by flipping the phase on this, you can use it, and fading that in, you basically are fading in, cross-fading the effect in and out. So you could do that with the high pass and low pass. And then in the center at 64 is the dry signal, so there's no filter affected. So this is a little bit tricky. I found someone who had basically put together this rack, but I tweaked some of the settings so that when you scroll through the frequency, that you can kind of hear it all the way through, instead of having dead spots at the very high frequencies or at the low frequencies where you can't hear, like close to 20 hertz and close to 20 kilohertz. So anyway, I tuned it a little bit. so it sounds a little bit better. I also added a drum bus to this channel just to give it a little bit more oomph, since it's the kick drum and I do a lot of kick drum oriented stuff. But you can turn this off or turn it on. This isn't really mapped to anything. Great. And then this OPZ channel strip manual CC mapper. So in Ableton Live, so all this stuff, this is one big instrument rack here. So let me just go back to this. And you save this instrument rack, you can find it in your menu here and drag it and drop it into a new Ableton session and have all these mappings already set up for your OPZ. Now the only thing that doesn't work are the effects send 1 and 2, which are on this sort of like this yellow page of parameters, the pan left and right, and then the volume. So these are mapped out to the channel specific sends in Ableton. And for whatever reason, Ableton does not allow you to save those MIDI CC settings and drag and drop this as something into other sessions and have it remember these mappings. So you may have to manually, so for instance, it's as easy as you drag this into a track, you click map, and you click on the effects in. Now, one thing to note is you can no longer click and drag or change these values with your mouse. It's all kind of mapped to the OPZ now. You can also change the value here within this Max for Live module, but that's one of those things to be aware of. It's not a deal breaker for me, but maybe it is for you. The other thing that's mapped out with the drum channel are the, let's see, we have attack, decay, sustain, and release. And so these are mapped out. Let's see if you can see it. You can see it applied here. And so it functions pretty similar to how it would function on the OPZ. I had to make some adjustments on the just how far, like the decay, the minimum range on that is 29%. And I was finding that if you let that go all the way down to 0%, that basically made it so that if you use some of the performance effects, and specifically the ones you can find on number 9 here, that shorten the decay and release, all of a sudden you couldn't hear these synths because it would shorten it so much that it was not audible. It would shorten the signal so short that you couldn't hear it anymore. So anyway, so maybe I can just kind of demonstrate. So envelopes, you can mess with the attack, turn down the decay if you want, but it's a drum, it's pretty short. And release. Now the snare drum is basically the same kind of setup. I used a sampler instrument, similar mappings. There's no new tricks for the drum. It's just basically different samples that I have, and you can add 24 samples mapped out to all different tracks if you want. So let me just do a simple beat and adjust the envelope. This is something that you might have to do for a lot of this stuff. So right now, there are no sounds coming out of the OPZ that's being recorded. These are only sounds that are coming from Ableton, but the OPZ is controlling these in Ableton. Now, hi-hat track is selected. Let me just figure out like a pattern here. I want to change the velocity. And let's make sure the envelope is set up. Okay, really basic. And then I have a sort of a percussive effect that I created. So this is channel 4. And again, this is a sampler instrument. You can drag and drop your own samples onto all of these 24 different keys, but I only have one sample included in this template that's mapped out to all 24 keys. But you have the ability to change the pitch. Filter, all that stuff. So why don't I just do something really quick. So you can fully use the sequencer on the OPZ in the same way that you would use it on its own. That includes like all this sort of the MIDI little effects and stuff. All right, let's talk about the synths. So bass. Let's see. So the bass, this is an analog instrument. So this is another native Ableton item here. And I have parameter 1 mapped out to octave boost. So let's see if and then parameter 2 mapped up to sub-octave. Doesn't sound too great. You can kind of find the sweet spots. And then you have the filter cut off and stuff. So there you go. And like all the other ones, attack, decay, sustain, and release are all mapped out on here as well. Now a quick note, this page with the LFOs on the OPZ, I haven't mapped that out to anything. And the specific reason is, if you change the values on the LFO here, and that can actually have some effect on the parameters internally on the OPZ, but those values, the changes to MIDI CC values that are happening internally don't actually get sent out of the OPZ into Ableton. So basically if something was happening here on the LFOs, you would probably hear some changes on the OPZ, but you wouldn't hear them affect anything in the Ableton template. So I just chose not to map these out. And that works for me. Okay, so that's the bass. And mind you, I have the effect sends 1 and 2. So effect send 1, like, all right, so I have a reverb that I'm sending from the bass. Turn that down a little. Cool. Let's see what this synth is. This is the, what do they call it in Ableton instruments? The wavetable synth. And I have things mapped out here to, let's see, there's a macro one. Let's see what it does. You can see it on screen there. And then parameter 2 is the warp fold effect. So kind of fun. Let's see if I can just do a quick record. I'll record that. Let's see how this deals with me changing the parameters as it's recording. Maybe I have to hold the record and see how that works. Yeah, so by holding the record button down, it basically assigned those parameter changes to individual steps. You can see it kind of show up here. So it's not like a smooth recording of those parameter changes, but it was recorded into the OPZ sequencer in that way. Okay. So let's make this happen every other time. Now we have the ARP. And this is another wavetable synth. And I basically wanted this to sound similar to like a 303 Get an Acid sort of feel. So this is parameters 1 and 2 are mapped out to color and fold. So let's see how this works. It's a little heavy on the reverb, so you know. All right, now let's talk about chords. All right, so for chords, what I'm using here is the operator, and I have this mapped out to algorithm on 1 and tone on 2. So let me just figure out like some sort of. Let's see. All right, and so let me mess with the envelope. Whoa, that's kind of loud. So let's see how the parameters 1 and 2. So this goes through the different algorithms, and then this is tone. Filter. And then one thing that I think is interesting is when you can actually change the parameters. And let's say if I want to send a little bit more reverb, say right here. I want this to not happen as often. Okay, so those are the tracks I have going on. I figured the operator would be good since it's an FM synth to use for chord-oriented polyphonic type sounds. Now let's talk about the effects. So effect 1 is delay. Let me send the, so the arpeggiator is being sent. Actually, let me just send the snare. And let's look at how this is set up. So this parameter 1 changes the delay time for both left and right channel. So you might have to listen to try to get things kind of in sync. There we go, that sounds pretty good. The second parameter is feedback. And I tuned it so it's only up to 99% feedback, so it shouldn't really cause too many problems with blowing speakers. And then, similar to the OPZ, this is the frequency cutoff and resonance. And, you know, similar to what you can do, so you can do all the same sequencer tricks here. Let's see, so let's say I have the delay selected, and on these two, I just basically put a step in here, so it's going to keep that delay time. But say I want to mess with the delay time here and do something maybe more extreme. Oops. Come on. Buggy. All right, there, the step's recorded. And I can take that and change the delay time to something extreme. Maybe crank up the feedback a little bit more. And maybe turn the frequency up a little bit. Now let's hear what that sounds like. Oh, it's almost too extreme. But drags it out there, and then this step brings it back to the original, and then it starts back where it came from. So you can sequence in those changes, which is pretty fun. Take that step out, and that parameter change is not in there. Or at least I thought it wasn't. Anyway, you can have some fun with it. So that's that. Let's talk about reverb, the other effects. And before I go there, I tried to replicate the delay as much as I could, and the way the delay works on the OPZ is you can choose, you can use the keys to actually choose the delay time, whether it be in sync with tempo and some sort of division based on that, or just kind of like another smaller increment. But I couldn't figure out a way in Ableton to map out these keys to individual parameter values in live, which I think is what I would need to do to be able to affect the time in the same way, using keys rather than a knob. So the compromise was use this parameter to change the delay time. I don't think it's exactly the same as how it is on the OPZ, but I think it works pretty well for what I want. All right, now let's talk about reverb. So, reverb. Let's use maybe the bass. I'll mute out the other stuff. So you can change the room size. So let's say I shrink it down. And so that's a small room, but the decay time is 60 seconds. So you can really crank up the decay time in a small room, and it starts to get pretty washed out. But you also have the filter here and resonance. So it's kind of fun to sweep through that, go all the way down. I'm going to bring this down, the decay time to a more reasonable level, and then increase the room size. And like the delay, on the reverb you can also automate these parameter changes like a sequence. So just for kicks, let's see what happens if I take the second step and I change the room size to be pretty big and crank up the feedback a little bit more. So a lot of possibilities there. Right, and I'll turn that down a little bit. Now, the last thing here is the master channel. So, mind you, okay, there's a couple things about before I jump onto the master channel, there's a couple things about the effect sends that are bothering me. One is I can't figure out a way to actually record the parameter changes as MIDI on these effects into live and be able to replay them in live as if I recorded that performance. I did a ton of research to try to find out a way to do it. There's some notes about using dummy clips in kind of a hack job sort of way. It didn't work. I tried to follow those steps and it didn't work. If anyone knows how to do it, I would love to know, but it seems like kind of a big, it kind of blew my mind that you weren't able to record parameter changes on these effects send tracks. Even if you try to move these to their own audio track and then create a dummy clip on that audio track, it didn't work. I can't figure out how to do it, and I don't want to necessarily duplicate these effects on each of these individual tracks here. No, because then it wouldn't function the same way, and you probably have some CPU issues. So anyway, if anybody knows a way to be able to record the parameter automation for these effect sends in Ableton Live, please let me know. I would love to know. Okay, so on to the master channel. So on the master channel, similar to on the OPZ, you have this parameter 1 is chorus, this parameter is drive, this is frequency and resonance. So I did something a little bit different. So on, so let's bring some of these tracks back in. And this one is delays. All right, back to the master channel. So chorus. There's a chorus in there. I kind of tuned it to have kind of a robotic effect. It's just fading the chorus in and out. Cut off, this deal. Right in the center, it's completely dry. And then drive is fun. So I was thinking to myself, oh, drive, let's make this have sort of a sidechain effect on the synths and other things, on the synths and the effects. So it's using the kick as a sidechain source and then making the effects for delay, reverb, and the synths as a group all be affected by the kick drum. Right now the drive is all the way up. And you can see on here, it's like pumping that compressor I have on the synth group and on the delay and on the reverb. When I bring the drive down, it increases the threshold, and you no longer have the pumping on everything except for the drums. So it's kind of a nice way to let the kick drum cut through the mix some more. And I did that because when I was using the saturator in Ableton and messing with the drive, it was just like distorting and sounding bad too quickly. And I felt like this was a better use of that parameter. So I'm pretty happy with that, because I think it sounds better than what you get on the OPZ. All right, so in addition to that, on the master channel, I just have like some sort of gentle limiter on there, and then I have this like what is it, this OTT effect. If you turn it off, this is a multi-band compression effect, but I felt like it kind of separates things and brings up the different bands so that they sound a little clearer. I'm a fan of it. If you don't want it on there, just turn it off. But I don't have any parameters mapped to this guy. So yeah, this is just the master channel getting cranked. All right, so that's the template in a nutshell. So yeah, I think it's kind of fun. I think the best use case for me is what I'm showing you. Just go and plug it into your computer, run Ableton Live, make sure you have Live 10 and Max for Live installed, and I think this template will just work for you. Basically, the other thing, I didn't want to have any MIDI running into the OPZ. I can't remember if I turned MIDI in off on this or not. I can't tell right now, but in any case, the whole purpose of this template was to sort of take in all of the MIDI performance data from the OPZ and turn it into and utilize Ableton's samplers and instruments as new sound sources that you could use that same performance data on here and make it sound similar. Oh, I didn't even show you like one of the best parts. Let me so the other thing I was trying to achieve with this template was I love using the performance effects. And you can still use these guys, including this one here, which shortens the decay and release on everything. This one extends it. This one randomizes the notes. This one randomizes the drum keys, but like all the drum samples are the same per key right now. So this one does some crazy panning stuff on the drums, just on the synths. Yeah, so you can use those performance effects within Ableton and have them react in a similar way. So that was really one of those things that I was trying to achieve with this template, is have that full flexibility. All right, so that's the template in the nutshell. This is the first version of it. I intend to do more, but as you can see, when everything's running, the CPU is like under 20% on my computer, which is great. There's a lot of like MIDI information being sent to it, and there's not a ton of latency. It's pretty good. And just an FYI, I used Reactor. I tried to create a similar template using Reactor, making a custom ensemble, and also using, what was it, VCV Rack. And I ran into major like CPU performance issues and latency problems that just made it so it wasn't fun or really all that practical. So yeah, I found that wow, CPU stays pretty low when I'm using Ableton, and I have a lot of flexibility with the sound sources that I can do. I can create instrument racks that have reactor instances in there, but for this template I try to keep as many things, as many instruments and plugins native to Ableton Live as I could, so that more people could just open this up and get some use out of it. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope you, I'll put a link to the template in the description of the video here, and I hope everybody has some fun with it.